Did you hear me? I said due diligence checklist. We're going to talk about the due diligence.
How would you measure the topography?
Topography?
Sure. Topography. That's totally
That's good.
what
I know. I flub up all.
Well, I was going to ask that you first list due diligence checklist. What do you mean? That's like good.
Hi, everybody. I'm Michael. I'm here together with my family, Rachel, my niece, my sister, Amy, and my other niece, Stephanie. And today we're going to be talking about a due diligence checklist as well as resilient garden design principles to help you when you plan and design your garden. So, Rachel, are you ready to dig in?
I don't know. Are we ready?
Right now?
Now, Steph?
Ladies, are you ready to go?
Aye, Captain!
Let's grow!
You said the wrong thing. That's not the SpongeBob.
Yeah, but
I don't
she
know
got
SpongeBob.
it right.
No, I told you a million times.
Mike, I see that you made this list. What do you mean by the first point, the due diligence checklist?
So a due diligence checklist, let me give you an analogy. Think about baking a cake. You want to make sure you have all the ingredients so that you can have a successful cake when you bake it.
So like you don't have to run to the garden store multiple times before you really get the project started?
Right.
Excellent.
Helps you avoid all these baking disasters.
Yeah. and
Why
that's-
is it important?
Because like what your mom is saying is that when you don't want to keep going back to the garden center to keep getting plants because you didn't space them out or put the right quantities on the plan, or you over designed and you bought too much stuff and so you need to return the lumber. So there's a lot of things on a due diligence checklist that help set the parameters for a successful project.
I see on here that you have 4 main components. What are they?
So the 4 main components is that you want to have one will be the garden objective. And so it's basic, that's the fun part where what do you guys want to do with your garden? Do you want it?
I want to do everything.
Is it
And
like,
that's a common thing that everyone has. You want to make sure you put the right things that you can do for the footprint you have. And so the garden objective is that's the fun part of like, we want to have a patio space. We want to have an area to entertain. We want an area for barbecue. Say you want to have an area if you have dogs, you want to have a little dog run area. So all those things, you want to make sure that you have together your wish list, and that garden objective is sound because the very next thing is, and Amy's really good with numbers,
Is budgeting.
Budget.
What's it going to cost me?
super important. And there's workarounds. What I've done over all these years is that some folks get really excited, namely me. I can't lie, as a designer, as a landscape architect, I want to give you all that you could possibly have, but you can also phase your projects over time if you can't budget for it all in one session. But you can also value engineer and pull things out at the end to make sure you get the design for the money you put. And you want to put your money smartly, and that's another big important part of the due diligence checklist, is that make sure you get those things that you know you can build in your space.
we're balling on a budget.
So the next
Yes.
one is her inventory. What does that mean?
So this is super important. You want to make sure that you don't place stuff that you are going to have a conflict. If you have any easements, if you have an area of your home that has topography issues, right, that is draining water towards your home, you want to reverse that and move that water away from your home. But you can also use that as an advantage or use that as part of a rain garden system or something else to catch water for you if you want to have that experience and make lemons out of lemonade in that case. So that's a very important thing, is to make sure you don't have utilities that are going to be in the center of your space. You want to make sure you screen them. So you have to know all your knowns. Make sure you know where your hose bibs are. You know where your electrical lines are, your plumbing lines, so that you don't put something in a place that is going to affect those functions of your home.
How
or
would
your
you
garden
measure
space.
the topography?
Topography?
Sure. Topography. That's totally
That's good.
what
I know. I flub up all.
Well, I was going to ask, can you explain what that means
That's
to
what I
our
just asked.
viewers?
Just
So
as
topography is changes in the grade of your home. And in South Florida, we have a lot of flatland, but flatland is notoriously hard to grade for because you're dealing with inches sometimes. And you know how these rains are. It's been raining off and on all day here. We finally caught a pocket of time. And you want to make sure that you have the catchment areas to take that water away from your home so you don't create any structural or issues with that. And also bring it over to where you can actually use it for the planting beds. But you also need to know, and we'll talk about that in resilient design, having the plants that can handle those type of situations. Environmental risk analysis is also the 4th and last item on the due diligence checklist, and that's to kind of know what What other things are around? Do you have specimen trees? Do you have some rare plants? Or are you next to a natural forest community or something else that you got to make sure you protect those assets? And some mature trees are valuable assets that many people should consider keeping in their garden space if at all possible, and work that into the final design.
All right.
So,
Very good.
what
So,
do you think you learned a little bit about the due diligence checklist?
I definitely
Absolutely.
learned how to pronounce topography.
So now what we're going to do is we're going to wait for this plane to pass, and we're going to come back and talk about resilient garden design. Now let's talk about resilient design.
What is it?
Resilient design is like a superhero garden. Think of it as a garden designed by Wolverine. And what is Wolverine known for?
His healing,
Right. He has these regenerative.
regenerative.
Thank you. I can't
Regenerative.
seem to get
It
that word.
runs in the family.
So he has these
That's
healing
right.
powers, for sure. So he has these abilities to heal, and you want your garden to be able to heal itself when it's hit with an adverse condition, like a storm event or a drought or a fire. You know, there's a lot of things that can affect the garden, and it's very important to have a resilient garden so that you have something sustainable over the long term.
Sounds right.
And that's why it's important. You know, it's important to know those things for a resilient garden.
absolutely. Particularly here in South Florida.
Right. And there are 4 steps that I condensed on a resilient garden design, what the components of a resilient garden design that you can take to use for designing your garden. And the first one, Amy, what's the first one?
Well, it talks about enhancing the positive and reducing the negatives. What do you mean by that?
So let's say you've got lemons, you want to make lemonade out of it. You want to, you want to know about what areas work as is. So you're like, hey, I've got these trees, these palm trees, I've got these other shade trees that I like to use and incorporate in the garden, but I also have some other features of the yard that is really nice. Maybe have a rock outcropping if you're down south in South Miami, and you want to enhance those features, and that will help you also on cost. Amy's big on budgeting.
Absolutely.
She's very good at numbers, and so that's very important to know what works as is, but also you also want to know what areas need help. That's the second part of knowing how to develop the garden's foundation. That's step 1, garden's foundation. And so you want to make sure that if you have an area that's draining incorrectly towards your house, you want to make sure you change those grades, move the water away from the home, and then move them to where they need to be in the garden space.
Very good.
So once you have the foundation, what comes next?
That's another one on our item is to lay out the garden functions and the accessible routes. Whatever likes you guys.
Ready.
Sorry, ADHD. You know what this one is, right, Amy? Lay out the garden functions and accessible routes, and that means measure twice,
Oh, I like this.
cut once, and then she goes, can I have one? I love tape measures. This is my tape measure. You took my tape measure.
Oh,
So you
Well,
want
they're
to measure.
mine now.
You want to measure twice and cut once. That's an adage that people use in carpentry and woodworking. That you want to make sure you design things right and you lay out your space correctly, so that you say you want to have a patio space with.
Mine's the biggest.
That's mine too.
Not
This is
anymore.
yours. She steals all my tape measure. We have a thing. We love tape measure. I don't know why.
Love 'em.
This is just great. So you want to make sure you lay out your spaces, to fit the components. Say you have an entertainment space. You want to put a 5-foot table and some chairs. We're going to need a space that's 9 by 9 to allow those chairs to push out. And so you want to make sure that you incorporate that and don't under-design your patio space so that you can't put the elements in that you want. The barbecue space and the tables next to it. So it's very important to know those dimensions. But it's also super important to know what else.
access route.
Yes.
How to get to it.
I've seen so many designs of people just flooded with garden plants, and it's great, but you can't get to the hose bib, or you can't. The guy comes in to change out Amy's air conditioner. They can't get to the side where they need to, and they trample the plants, and that hurts your garden's ability to bounce back, because mechanical damage from someone stepping on it or crushing a plant is hard to come back from.
Heartbreaking.
So you just want to do smart design in that regard. So that's step 2. Lay out the garden functions and accessible routes. Now we're moving on to, and this, Stephanie, you're going to help me with this one. Step 3, what's that?
Need to increase the shade.
Right, and we also need to look at limiting turf areas. So we want to limit turf areas, but increase shade on the home, because you want to reduce the cost. We're dealing with all these heat issues now. I'm sweating like crazy, but it's an issue that you can control with design. And so west-facing facades on homes here in South Florida, that's where you get cooked the most, and that's where you get the most impact from those afternoon suns that can negatively impact your electricity bill. But you also want to limit turf areas so you don't spend too much on fertilizer, on irrigation, on maintenance and mowing. So you want to put them strategically for the needs because they have a vital function. Lawns are great. You want to just make sure that you don't overdo the lawn if you don't need to. And so that I think is a big takeaway for step 3 is limit the turf and shade your home wherever you can. It can be on the south side as well, but it's mostly the west side you need to look at if you have the room. If it's too narrow, you can maybe look at putting some palms to help control that afternoon sun.
Yeah, the shade, you could be 10, 15 degrees cooler in the shade.
Oh.
And here in South Florida, that's a
It's
big
necessary.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, Steph, you're out in the sun and I'm in the shade and I'm taking it. That's so unfair.
She's young.
It's okay, I like it.
All right, so Steph, now we're dealing with the fourth. So I compressed this at work with my team of LAs. I had a very large due diligence checklist because we dealt more with platting and we're dealing with easements, with FPL and other issues that we have to deal with on a much larger scale. But for garden design, I've condensed it down into these 4 main components. But if you have a question and you want to know more, what can they do?
Comment down below.
Bingo. So do that if you have a question on any one of these things, on due diligence or the resilient garden design. We'll make sure we get back to you. But on the 4th step, this is a very important step. So what's the first thing I have written down here, Steph?
Choose the right plants.
Right. So you want
right location.
Right. So step 4 is designing for garden resiliency, which is the topic. Resiliency equals sustainability. Think of it that way. A garden will be sustainable if it can be resilient. A garden's not sustainable without resiliency. It just won't happen. So the first thing you want to do is choose the right plant for the right location. Now, what do we have before us here?
We have a variety
Right.
of plants. The first one is variety.
Yes. Amy, beautiful liriape here. You want to choose the right plant for the right location. So liriape is a tough ground cover. This is evergreen giant. It can get quite tall, 18 inches by 18 inches across. And you want to place this in sun or shade. This one's very adaptable. It's really cool that way, and it's pretty tough. But you don't want to crowd them and put them in at 6 inches on center when you buy them at the garden center. You're wasting your money. These things fill out, and they're easy to propagate. So you can.
Oh yeah, I took these. Actually, this one I dug it up because it was getting so big. They were all too close, and
She didn't listen.
replanted and took off.
Yeah. So it's just knowing that you have the right spaces, and we'll give you some of that information here on the screen that you can look at spaces for certain plants. Ground covers, you typically want to have them spaced every 15 to 18 inches, depending on the ground cover. And on this, we have a
Look,
butterfly,
butterfly.
everybody. Hey, butterfly.
Oh, look,
Oh, too. Thanks for coming in, saying hello.
That's a
That's
butterfly.
that is what? The zebra.
Okay.
The zebra, great butterfly for South Florida, super tough. Loves this plant on the end. We're going to talk about it. That's a non-native. We're going to talk about her now. That pink one is the Jatropha.
The
Non-native, but
pink
super
flower
drought
plant.
tolerant. Right. So this is a very resilient plant. It can handle drought. It can handle a little bit of water conditions, but it attracts butterflies because of the flowers it has. It's a really wonderful plant. As is
The locust berry.
the locust berry. Thank you, Rachel.
My favorite.
This is a beautiful, tough Florida native. Super tolerant of sun or shade. Prefers probably to have a little bit more sun than shade, but it's a very resilient plant. A very tough native. And it's so cool because it's different. It gives you this thing. And this plant, we'll show you here, has a beautiful flower. It's so pretty. It's pink and white. It's stunning when she flowers in the spring. Love this plant. But you also need to know that this plant will get much bigger than the variety. This is a small to medium shrub, or you can actually grow this as a multi-trunk tree. This can grow that. So it's a really cool plant, and you can keep it many ways. In the shade, and in a shady environment, or even in hard sun, you can keep it as a low to medium shrub. And another plant, to talk about the right plant, right location, is the variegated, thank you, Steph, the variegated clusia. You probably see this all over Miami and Broward and Palm Beach counties right now, and further north. You see the green version of clusia. This is the Clusia frutifera. It's a very, very tough, non-native, drought-tolerant, shade-tolerant, sun-tolerant plant. But you got to give this a tremendous amount of room. I have a more rare one here, which I absolutely love. We've done a video on this. We had it on our balcony in Miami Shores, and our home, not in Miami Shores, our balcony in our apartment in Brickell, but they shut down our apartment because they're doing work on repairing the building. And so I brought ours over here, And she just loves it here, so I don't think I'm going to get it back from her.
All his plants love it here.
So this plant, wonderful hedge, but you've got to give her room. I've seen people put them as a hedge, and they're constantly trimming it. It's not going to grow tight like you would with a photocarpus. Those can be grown much tighter. And if you have these plants, you've got to give them 5 feet of width because they want to get that wide, and they can easily get to 10 feet. More like 8 feet, but they can get to 10 feet. So it's always putting the right plant in the right locations for what it wants to do for you to minimize the maintenance, which is a cost, and to maximize the long-term survivability of plants. Because plants, unlike buildings, they evolve over time.
You can still maintain your aesthetic.
Right. So we have another thing on step 4 in garden resiliency stuff. What's that? What are my other 2 items there?
It says site conditions.
Right. What are your site-specific conditions? So I alluded to that a little bit before in the due diligence checklist and other talks we just went through. You want to make sure you have everything, all the site conditions that are going to work for you for your final design, like where the utility lines are, where the grades are, where the future grades you want it to be, so you can pitch the water to an area where
Maybe
they want
where
to make a
some
rain garden.
of your garden area is in shade and some is in full sun, things like that.
Yeah, you want to, it goes back to the first point of this, of like putting the right plant in the right location. You want to have rain garden plants in the rain garden low depression areas. You want plants that want to handle more moist areas and moisture in the soil. But also you want to know your site-specific conditions of what type of soil do you have. You have a high pH and a high sandy soil, you may need to amend that. And you want to amend it most likely with organic material and corn castings and some other potting mixes. But you want to make sure that you're shying on fertilizer. Organic fertilizer is okay, but you got to be careful these days with fertilizer because that can get into our waterways and it creates a problem. It creates a problem for the environment. And the last step is what?
Efficient irrigation.
Right. So step 4, designing for garden resiliency, an efficient irrigation system. Super important. You don't want to spend extra money if you don't need to. If you have a pump system, you don't want to pay more money on the electricity to run the pump. And you don't want to overwater your plants, which can negatively impact. And you want to make sure you separate plant grow zones from lawns. Lawns need more water than shrub beds, especially if you mulch them well. And we'll talk about that in a future video on the 9 principles of Florida-friendly landscaping. And we'll go into this a little bit more, and that helps you with this. So make sure you stay tuned to our channel because we're going to do more videos about these things. But it's super important to make sure you have an efficient irrigation system. And drip systems are great. You can use them. They put water right where they need to be, and they tend to work really well. But it does come down to also maintenance. One thing gardeners tend to do, and we don't mean any to jump on them at all, but sometimes lawn folks, they come out and they mow, and if your pop-up head is up by accident, they'll mow right over and just go on to the next one. And then when your system turns on, you have this water just pouring out, loading, and you create a fountain and you make a mess. So it's very important to make sure you maintain your automatic irrigation system so you don't create a problem down the road. But with that, we ran through these things, but what do I have here at the last point? What is the very important thing at the very bottom? What do I have here?
You have fun!
Yes. The whole part of this thing, I feel, as a landscape architect, I love doing garden designs with folks because gardens are just wonderful places, right? You spend, when you're with your family and the weather's not hot as Hades as it is here in the August sun. Only fools and Irishmen come out in the noonday sun, and that's us today. That's us. So we want you to take that away, to have fun in this whole process. We're here to help you. You can check to our channel for lots of other tips on taking care of plant-specific things that we talk about, as well as houseplants. But it's important to have fun in your design because you want this space to be something that you enjoy for years to come. So with that, I don't know if you guys have any more questions for me.
Like and subscribe.
Steph wants you to like and subscribe.
That's right. Come back and see us again.
Yeah, she wants you to come back because
I want you to come
to see her.
She likes being on camera.
Anyways, thank you guys so much. And until next video, bye.
Bye.
Please remember to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. And tell your friends and family. We post videos weekly. Thanks.